This is a sort of a two-part project. We're going to have a series, maybe 10 talks, where we've invited particular people to address particular topics and to work with us to understand the ideas. And then the second half of the year, we're going to look at the talks, and we're going to try to do an exhibition series based on the talks and the sort of input that people have given. So it's not just simply a lecture series, it's a lecture series that's going to fold into an exhibition series that should start, in November? I'm Sue, and I'm one of the Last Wednesday critics. There's 5 of the 6 are here, Mickey on sound. Joachim is running the bar. Matthew is the driver tonight. Elsa's a hostess, I guess. Anyway, and I'm going to be the moderator, and every time will be a different moderator. The next meeting will be on February 29th, the last Wednesday of the month. And I hadn't thought about it, but that's a leap Friday, I guess. It's a leap, it must be leap year. What about it? Okay, so our guests tonight are Danny DeVos, is that right? And Hedwig Houben. Okay, Houben. And the topic tonight is mediating mystification. And I want to give a little background to what we were thinking and why we invited our guests. And then I'm going to start with Hedwig will talk a little bit more about her work, and then we'll discuss. Oh, you don't know this part? No. Okay, well then don't worry, we're not going to have that. But before we had the idea that one of the guests would have a little bit more of an in-depth discussion of the work, but if you're not prepared for that, that's fine. Now, there's a couple things I want to let you know that are really strange about our group. One, we've already been asked why we're not Skyping this to the world tonight, which is a really good question, and we did think about this. But I think that we thought that we live in this really image-filled life, and that sometimes knowing artists and knowing artworks is really just knowing what their artworks look like. We have images in their head, but it's such a rare opportunity to actually discuss, the ideas behind their work and the ideas and how maybe the ideas behind their work connect with some of the ideas of things we're thinking about elsewhere. So that's why we're not so high-tech in terms of Skyping or videotaping, but we are sound recording this, and we're going to try to make podcasts that would be available to the world on our website. The world. Website's available to the world and the NSA. And that our website is just the same as our name, lastwednesdaycritics.com. Right, .com, not .org. .com. It's a WordPress. And we really encourage people to listen to it when they're washing the dishes or taking a bath. Those are the times they have a lot of downtime. But anyway, the point is that there's a comments page. You can make comments. You can suggest other talks. You can suggest. Right now, we're thinking of this Last Wednesday Critics as a 1-year project with the hope that people that come to it will have the desire to take it over and do Last Wednesday Critics next year. We don't really want to be the imperial. We want to start a discussion rather than, do what we want to do. So anyway, that's something to think of too. So the whole year is on the topic of mystification and mysticism. Because some of us who went to the Venice Biennale came away thinking that, wow, there's a whole topic there of mysticism that was going on that wasn't addressed. And even weirder than that is that in the catalog, they really tried to talk that down and say, oh, it looks like mysticism, but it's not. So we were thinking, we're not the mysticism we have in mind isn't spiritualism where it's a mysticism for God, or the unknown is because of God. The mysticism we were thinking about is artists who allow the unknown into their work, that they're not just answering all the questions, that they're making room for something that's unknown. And then we were thinking, wow, that's really interesting because some artists, there's such a trend to make room for the unknown that some are actually constructing that unknown. So we're sort of on the fence. We're trying to figure out what is the border between mysticism and mystification. And then we were thinking, wow, with video, it's very different, because it's always a secondhand experience. That even has another slant, because is it constructed, is it real? Even if it's totally unedited, there's something that happens in your brain when you look at something that's coming from video. So that's how we arrived at this talk today, which is mediating mystification. But we're not trying to say that these guys are mystifying us. We're trying to say that their work allows us to think about this process and to think about the process of editing the camera, the fact that it's not a direct experience. Or in Danny's case, his performances are always live, but what we're left with is a portrait or a document of an experience. So what we encourage is that you ask questions, that we have a discussion. It can go as long as possible. If after 45 minutes we have nothing left to say, we can leave. We're not a university. We don't need to have, we don't have any goals here. We just have a goal to have an interesting conversation. So do you want to say anything first? Do you want to start with a question? How would you like to proceed? Okay. So what I can...
Maybe we can sort of introduce.
Okay, why don't you do that? Why don't you introduce...
So I'm Devos or Devos in het Nederlands. I'm basically a performance artist and I'm doing performances since 1979, which is 35 years. I've done roughly 160 performances since then. And I've also, apart from that, since 1981 or so, I'm also with a band, Club Mall, which is an industrial music performance band. And we also did, maybe 120 concerts or so. And I don't make, or I rarely make objects that you can buy or that are left behind when I do. So when I sometimes do an exhibition, it will always be an installation that's built on the spot for once and then is destroyed afterwards.
Introduce myself shortly. Yeah, I'm Houben, and I mainly work with video and performance, which is always very much concerned about I think my main concerns are concepts that are quite abstract, I think, like that are involved in the process of making, let's say. So, for example, things like collaboration or cooperation, not necessarily with other people, but with for example, I did one work where the hand has to collaborate with the eyes, but also with intuition, conceptual thinking, all these things that become quite complex if you start to try to grasp them, actually, and that's mainly my practice.
Okay, I start with some questions. So one of the things that's interesting about the way they work is both of them actually work live. Sometimes the videos of the documents look edited, but in fact they're documents of live events. Mm-hmm. So when you're working with either the camera or the video as the document of your live event, are you at all thinking not of the camera necessarily as a witness or as your mirror or your audience, but somehow how it will be captured for eternity or something like that? Like, how conscious are you of the camera, less as an audience where you're performing for it, but as a mediator, something that will not perfectly reflect what you're doing?
To me, the camera is totally from, especially video, from my 160 performances, I have, I think, 6, maybe 7 videos, and 5 of them were made by people who were there more or less by chance, and they had a camera by chance. Some people filmed the performance with their mobile phone, and it's only 3 minutes of the performance, or maybe the performance only lasted 3 minutes. And the earliest one was in the 1980s, and it was because it was a squat place in Holland, and they just had some deal where they got CCTV system, so we used the CCTV system to film the performance. But apart from that, to me, whether I prefer that there's no camera actually, and also from 2 years ago I made a book of all my performances, and from some performances I don't even have a photo. So for me, it's only the live action that counts, and what's there, what I find afterwards, it's okay, but for me what counts is just a short description of what I did, and apart from that, what people who were there tell other people. But I never ever organize a photographer or a video. And if there is, if it happens like in some place where they ask, oh, can we make a video? I tell them yes, if you're like in the back row, you can do whatever you want, but don't come between me and the audience, because I do a performance for the audience and not for a camera.
Not for it?
Not for a camera.
But what's wrong with having a documentation of what you do?
There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not my concern. My concern is making my performance, because that's my work, and my concern is not documenting my work. I think.
So you don't want to inscribe yourself in the history also? Because documentation is sort of historic process too?
Well, I'm not. There's people who study art history. It's their business to deal with my work, and how they do it. It's their job. They go to university to learn it. So I suppose they should learn it.
But do you think a picture or a video of your work is then worthless, or at least like?
I wouldn't say it's. I mean, nothing is worthless, but to me. First instance, financially it's worthless.
Okay.
On the other hand, it's good that you can have some kind of thing that maybe helps your memory, or helps other people to understand a little better what happened. But in theory, I don't think, for me, it's not necessary.
What then is
in most of my performances, especially the earlier ones, I can describe in one sentence what happened, and you don't need a picture to know how it was.
Right.
I don't quite.
Picture doesn't add any.
I don't quite agree with that. If you express something in text, you say like I can put it in 1 or 2 sentences what the performance is about for you. But for, let's say, for a wider group of interested people, a picture can help, can add to the experience to see what you were doing there. It's good. It's a medium that helps understand, no? A picture.
Maybe.
With I think a camera as well is framing something, so it can maybe help, but it's also maybe I don't know if it's a better if the camera is a better documentation, or in a way, then for example maybe just the way how people speak about a performance afterwards, or the memory that they take after. That's also a way of documenting, but more through word of mouth. Yeah, exactly.
I have a
It's all
question.
framing.
Yeah,
It's all framing.
Yeah.
If it's a camera or a
Yeah.
sentence or
Yeah.
how someone
Yeah.
perceived the performance.
Mhm.
But maybe it's demystifying. That's
Uh-huh.
maybe. Huh?
Well, I have one question. Do you keep a journal so that when after your performances you're able to sort of get a sense of so the sentences that you're making, like when you did your book in 2012, so you were making sentences something 30 years after the event and describing it, or you had access to information like
But part of this book I already made in 1982, which were then, I don't know, maybe 50 or so. And the other ones, yeah, I just remember them as they were. And I wrote it down when I made the book.
Well, I just want to be clear, we're not really here to challenge the artists on how they make their work and what they do, but I think that in that question that you hit upon something that I think would be worthy to discuss, that would be really helpful. So do we actually need a photograph to inscribe ourselves into history? I mean, I think that in itself is the kind of question that these kinds of discussions are supposed to bring up, rather than to decide whether Danny should from now on photo document his work or whether. I mean, I think a really good question, and I'm sure every one of us has a view, is do we need photographs to inscribe ourselves in history?
Or any other registration.
Yeah, right, exactly. Or
Visual registration.
Yes.
Or
Or
visual,
auditive
textual.
for that.
Auditive, but or textual. And then maybe that's a difference you talked about when you. But I remembered it. I wrote it down, and then it's also a description.
Yeah, but there's
you
also
can use historically.
what I find interesting in my in all this time is that I hear people describing my performances, or I hear people like young people who said, "Oh, my father or whatever, he saw a performance of you and he described it and it was this and that," and then I would say,
It wasn't me.
or I know your father very well, he never was there. So that's something that I find way more interesting than, in a way, having personally, than having my book where you can look and you have everything in painstaking detail. It was there and it was at that time and it was that date and everything. Which was also very difficult for me to do, actually, to find everything back when and where everything happened.
So the narrative of your performance, or the facts that were
I
happening.
find that very interesting.
Yeah, and they're changing because there is no visual evidence or document who what is saying this has happened and this is so is it part of your work that the narrative of your performances change a bit when you're saying I saw that to him and he will say to him and so
When they passed on.
Yes.
and when it's back to me it's a
Changes.
total difference.
Yes, it changes, yes.
Mhm.
But I mean, I find that interesting.
Yeah, that's quite mystic.
It sounds like oral history that you're
Yeah.
trying to capture. Some
It's
sort
also
of
like, it reminds me of things that we know from things that happened in the Middle Ages. There were no cameras or anything there, so people just told it to somebody else and told it to somebody else, and now we believe, oh, it's completely true that it happened like this. But I mean, how do you know?
Can I ask what are the kind of performances you do? Because I don't know your work.
Haven't heard.
She doesn't know the right storytellers.
Sorry?
You don't know the right storytellers.
No.
They're usually very physical, enduring, sometimes painful. It happens that somebody here in the audience can testify. The last performance I did, everybody left. I didn't know because I didn't see it, but when I stopped, I noticed that very well. Except the person who organized the performance, but she was standing in the corner and she was not looking. I guess there will be fascinating stories about
Is there an art historian who's interested in your work? With pictures or no pictures? Why wouldn't there be?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, why wouldn't there?
There is one, she's there.
Okay. So how does the lack of pictures affect your project?
The what?
The lack of photographs.
The lack of photographs. Well, yeah. I mean, I've noticed that in the latest performances, they were documented by other people. So and yeah, the first ones, the first ones Danny did, where there are not so much photographs of. I think it causes a lot of mystification around it. It's like but it's like Danny said, there is a story that goes around and you don't know what is real about it, and I think that's also interesting, and that's also the part of the work, I think, or how the work evolves in time.
What stays there when you have evidence of a photograph or a film? So people are speculating about your performances. No, it was not. You didn't jump from there to there. No, yeah, you did, because I saw it on the tape or on the photo. So then it's indeed demystificating when you have visual evidence of your performance.
I also think it makes you aware of the fact that a performance as an artwork can never be experienced again as it was. Even with a picture, with a video, it's never the same. So you can wonder if it really matters then to make pictures out of it.
No, but you said,
because a picture is a completely other experience of the performance than the artwork itself.
Mm. So when you're writing about him as an art historian, well, what do? Do you place pictures when the
you talk with the
publisher asks
artist?
for pictures?
You talk with the artist, and I think that's the most important thing.
And then you make a picture of him and place it.
No.
That's a book.
The cover of the book.
Pictures.
Art historians write text about it, so we kept the words and.
I think for me, the camera has a. I think for me it is important because I always document my works, and but it's mainly just I mainly use it as just one part of the audience in a way. Like I mainly use the camera as being just a witness, just like that. To be able to document my talks, because I give my performances are artist talks in a way. That you always lose something in the documentation, but maybe on the other end it also adds something else. Like that's the medium video, which so it becomes just another thing.
But it depends also how you what you as an artist understand in what the artwork is for you, because the documentation can also be a part of the artwork. If you make a video of your performance, and you edit the video in a way that it becomes also an artwork of a part of it. But that's your choice as an artist.
Yeah, no. You guys can also talk about your own experiences. You don't have to. Do you know what I mean? We invited the guests to sort of prompt a conversation. But if you've had similar experiences with documentation and video and mediate, and how your performances have been mediated or live action mediated, you can share that experience too.
Well, I was here because I'm interested in this topic, because I recently was producing a film with another artist, Douglas Park, in Korea, and we actually used his show in Seoul as a sort of starting point of a promotion tour, which was completely set up and faked actually, but to enlarge his sort of persona and his the way he was perceived, and it worked very well in the way that wherever you show up with a camera with an artist and you have some pictures to autograph, big crowds come and they want a picture and they want to see who it is, and you create sort of like here and now mystification. It has sort of attractiveness, I think, to people. And playing with that is an interesting thing to do as an artist. But it's completely different what Danny does, of course, because
it's completely different when you do something like on the street, and if there's a camera there, there's a lot of people who say, "Oh, it's all right because it's for the movie."
Yes.
But if there's no camera there, and you just go somewhere and you do something, then it's completely different. People will not ask you for an autograph. People usually react aggressively.
No, I agree.
Either they ignore you, or when it's something less ignorable, they get aggressive. So,
yeah, but that's the starting point of your being around in the public space, doing a performance has different starting points. You have a very different starting point than I have in my movie, but you get different reactions.
No, but I was just saying that the fact of a camera in the public surrounding.
But that's also what's happening in the media. If 8 organizations go to Africa and they point their camera somewhere, and the media follows, then immediately there's a completely different dynamic than if you pull the camera out of there, everybody's poor again, is getting killed again. I mean, it's this kind of, the camera is a very important dominator in this whole scene, and you can use it or you can ignore it, but I think I would prefer to be aware of it all the time, that cameras do different things with people's perception. Registration as a whole, yeah.
I also think that your work, I mean, these are two completely different things, because your work in the work itself is the video.
Yes. Yeah.
So the performance was made up, and the camera was there with a specific purpose, and I mean that's completely different from a performance where Danny emphasized that you really have to experience the performance at the moment.
Yeah, and not making a registration makes it more enigmatic.
If I would film your video, then it would be a documentation of the video.
Yeah.
And how did you end up with performance as a form for you?
Basically, I wanted to make artworks, because I consider myself as an artist, just like a painter or a sculptor or whatever. So I make artworks, and they are performances. So only the technique is different for me. But I wanted to make works that had the same kind of impact as a car accident. That you would see the work and you would be really gripped by it, and there was no way to look at something else until it was done.
And that's something you knew before your first performance, or there was like a train of thought over years?
Yeah.
you knew it. That's very interesting.
And it's still my intention.
But then you said your last performance, everybody left.
Yeah.
It was too successful.
I need to meet someone who was there.
Maybe you have to mention also that it lasted for how many hours? 3 hours?
No, 45 minutes.
Really?
That's when you left, I guess.
No, I didn't left actually.
You were the girl in the corner.
Ah, you were the one in the corner.
But it looked like it took 3 hours.
It could have lasted 3 hours, but after 45 minutes I was totally done. I mean, I didn't know that everybody was gone, but I couldn't continue.
And what did you do?
I sprayed around Kellogg's on the floor. There were people on both sides. There was a narrow corridor about this size. People were standing here and there, and in the middle there was like a hole. I was sewing cornflakes because it happened to be the 6th birthday of Mr. Kellogg's and some other things as well. And then I started there was a light, and then I started eating the cornflakes, but not swallowing them, so taking it back out of my mouth, and with the pulp building a wall between the people, just by accident. Some people were there and some people were there, and they had a free choice of deciding where they wanted to stand. And so I started doing this wall. But I mean, normally I never eat cornflakes. So I was a bit surprised that it's so hard.
Yeah, you
to
should
chew.
add milk to it.
I did. I have milk. I had like a carton or a bowl of milk or so. So I cupped milk with my hand. But after a short while, of course, my mouth was already open from the hard cornflakes. So in the beginning, it was like a yellow bit of wall, and then it became a little bit pink. And then after a while, it was totally red from my mouth. But I was so concentrated on that I didn't know what was happening. And after a while, I think I had a sound. Yes, that's why I know that it took 45 minutes, because I had a soundtrack going. And when the soundtrack ended, I stopped, which was barely the end that I could still continue. And then so I stood up, and then I saw, oh, everybody's gone.
But that is that for you important that the audience is there as well, or it's,
Yeah.
so it's in a way that
Yes, because
yeah.
because it has to become clear that I'm building a wall and I'm dividing them in this part and that part. So if there's nobody there, you cannot divide the audience. So.
No, yeah.
But I didn't know how many people would be there, or you never know what they're going to do either. They can walk around, or somebody might just start destroying what you're doing or something. That's all kind of things that can happen. So, but yeah. So when I met, they were gone.
Have you had any conflicts with your audiences like that? Like where they tried to destroy something, or
Yeah.
they threw something, like
Yeah.
food fights? No.
Well, actually the first performance I ever did, I didn't announce that I was going to do a performance. It was at the Academy of Fine Arts in Ghent, and there was a party of the sculpture department, so I was in the sculpture department. Because in the old days you had sculpture, painting, graphics, and photography, and that was it. So I was in the sculpture department, and I made a little, at the entrance, I made a little step So everybody had to step up on something, and then they walked. And after, when they walked up here and they were there was a glass plate in the floor, and I was lying under. So as soon as they were there and they looked down, they could see they were standing on top of somebody. And then most of the people went away. And after, it was about, it was 11th January, so it was very cold also, and I was in the doorway. And after 3 hours, somebody came and he sat down on top of me and he started talking to me. And he said that he really enjoyed it, sitting on top of me. And I was kind of, oh, I can't get out of here. And they couldn't, I had bandage around my face, so they didn't know who it was. And then I was there by myself. And I couldn't do anything because he was sitting on top of me, so I couldn't move. And that was actually, well, something I didn't expect that would happen. And it also happened that people threw beer over an electric plug so that all the fuses would go and the light was up and everything stopped. So it happened, or somebody would interfere with somebody, and then with something. I remember I was tied with my neck to something, and then someone from the audience came and cut the rope. And then another performance artist that I knew, he came and he reattached the rope with a handkerchief. Some things can happen.
But to me, that's the interesting thing about the media performance, that you have an idea as an artist, and you thought about this, and then it's, although in my work it's very scripted in a way, it's always has to be just in reality. I mean, so you can, it never really corresponds maybe with the idea you had, and I think that's for me also a very vulnerable part about performance, which I think that for me I find it
Yeah, to me also. I always know very well what I'm going to do, and it's all because I work very long on a performance. It looks like a performance is like, oh, you just arrive with a plastic bag with some stuff and you do your thing and you go back home. But it's not like that. It's working on an art piece like as long as a painter would work on a painting, or a sculptor would work on a sculpture. So it's like, I can definitely say that I work on a performance for like 6 months or so, when I know that some things happens more spontaneously, but usually when I kind of have an idea to do a performance, I work very long on it. But I don't, everything just happens in my head. I don't write anything down. I don't try anything, because that doesn't work at all. I just know I have some bits and I start working on it, and it all happens in here. It's like another artist, he walks around in the studio, and so I walk around in my head, and I have this there and I have this there, and then I put those things together, and then I say this should go like this. So I usually know very well what happens or what I'm planning to do, but there are always things that you cannot foresee. There's the audience. There's also things that physically work different than what you expect. Sometimes something is much more heavier to do than you expected. Physically, I mean, or something happens much faster than you expect, or there's many things, but still the whole thing is quite decided upon before what it should be, and it almost always works out like it's supposed to be also.
I have a question on documenting performances, because you said like your work is actually after 2000 documented more because of people, witnesses that has a camera or has a cell phone. I was thinking like, how did it really also, did you experience also a really a big change towards the public? Let's say you started in the 80s or at the end of the 70s, and nowadays you make a performance, like, because if I go to a performance or to see an art show, I see a lot of people with their cell phone taking a picture of what's happening or filming what's happening, and so there's directly for an audience there's a lot of people that has made directly a distance through what they see, because through an iPhone.
Yeah.
Do you feel that also in the audience, so apart from filming and stuff, that because of all this media that changed a bit, that
Not so much with performances, with when we do performances with our music band, then there's a lot more people in the audience filming. But when I do a performance, I mean, they're usually so impressive that people forget. I don't know. Were there people in Arnhem taking pictures?
I don't think so. No.
So
okay, I don't know.
people just forget because you're so. People don't take photos when there's a car accident in the street.
No, so that was what I was thinking.
That's
I
changing.
don't know, maybe afterwards, after the.
Maybe when, not with it. I mean, I had a car accident 6 months ago, so I know how it feels and how the audience reacts.
Audience.
It's different when there's a fire. Because when there's a fire, it's dark and more people come and look and you can see the whole thing. And then you have more people taking pictures of the fire.
Because there's
But when-
duration
but
or something.
Yeah.
When somebody's hit by a car and it's on the floor,
Just
and you can see, you have to be close, and you can see his face, and you can see that he has pain. People are not going to start taking pictures.
yeah, and actually my question, I would love to also look towards you. Let's say ask towards you how you already have maybe a camera standing on a tripod or someone filming.
Yeah.
But people like maybe are also looking at your performance, and there are people maybe filming, or I don't know how I guess you're also you're from another generation, so I guess your position towards image is also something else, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I guess you're more grown up, or you're more used to the everyday, let's say, witnessing of an event. I don't know how you deal with it, or is this also like a starting point why you always capture your work?
Well, to be honest, it's not really something. It's not really one of my concerns, I guess. I even don't. I don't know if I've ever seen someone film. Probably maybe a few times, but I haven't really noticed it. For me, it's also a very maybe practical thing that I don't perform that often. So I would perform 3 or 4 times a year or something. Because I think it just takes. I'm not a very natural performer, let's say. So it takes a lot of energy. So I just do it not so often, and so that's also a reason why I document the performances, and also because I think that they can stand, like the documentation or the film can also stand on itself. And then,
I don't know, is it maybe also different that I think your work is really in interactive. I don't want to say that your work is not, but really interactive with the public. It's really like, no, it's but interactive. Not that they are mostly a witness, but
Yes,
they're really.
there are some performances that were so interactive that the people had to interact before, otherwise they couldn't leave the room. So that's the most interactive you can get, I guess. But on the other hand, I don't really, well, in that kind of performance, of course, the interaction of the audience is the main point of the performance, because I create the situation, and if they want to get out of that situation, they'll have to do something to me. And what interests me there is the social interaction between the people in the room. You go into the room, let's say all of you are in here, and then I tie myself to the door, and if you want to get out of the door, you kind of have to half strangle me. So what interests me is the tension between every one of you. Who's going to do it? Who's going to open the door here? What are we going to do? How long will it last before somebody does it? Everybody knows that well. We can toss coins, or we can throw. I mean, that's then to me the performance, where basically I'm not doing very much. I just create a situation. In other performances, like the one with the cornflakes, it's necessary that there's an audience, because the division. The idea was also that I think the day I did the performance was the day they started building the Berlin Wall or something, because there were a lot of date references in the performance. It was either when they started building the wall, or the first person was killed when he jumped the wall, or something like that. So the wall was very important, and the wall had to be between people. But if the people are gone, first of all, I don't notice it. And secondly, then it's already been there, because the people were there, and the way that they react on it, that's their problem, by speaking.
Actually, also, I don't know. You work on a performance, what you said in your mind, but then like how it ends, you decide on the moment, or is there a sort of?
Yeah, that's something that can be different. Sometimes I have the end already calculated. Sometimes there are circumstances that make the end different. So it's either my physical condition, or it's interaction of the audience that defines the end.
So, Hedwig, have you had any people, when you did your performances, did you have any engagement with the audience, or they just sort of sit in their chairs and watch? How close are people? It's hard to tell from
Well,
the
it really depends, because I had one performance. I think normally, like the distance is a bit what you have, like when you go to a lecture or something. Like there is maybe one table or something distance.
Okay.
But I also did a performance in Düsseldorf where I didn't really plan it, but the audience was kind of far from me. Actually, really far. They maybe were standing by the red chairs. Yeah, it was really strange. But then I think it was interesting because I think for me the audience is really a tool. So I don't really interact with the audience, but I think the the audience is really the to create a certain tension, and I think this tension is because this tension is more has to do with this sort of because I'm often on the spot making the work in a way, or making the object. So and because the audience is part of the process in a way, or you can see that what I'm doing there. And of course brings it makes me nervous. So to say, so that brings I think attention which I need to make that work in the way I want to make it. So that's also the reason why I don't put the camera in my studio and give the lecture in front of the camera. I could do that. Maybe for the documentation, like for the picture wouldn't matter, but the content
So it sounds like your audiences are far more respectful than his. I mean, they keep their distance. They don't really.
But
Seems like they
don't,
just
don't
know the
you
form.
don't you create also? I mean, I don't know. Don't you create also the distance with this, how they film, how it's filmed, or
well,
the
of
way how
course,
it's set up?
Yeah, of course, because like there is often a table involved, so I sit behind the table, so that immediately creates a distance, and I think that's also why I make use of a table often to have a sort of distance from the audience, like it's sort of safe behind the table. So yeah, and there are chairs, so sometimes there people are sitting, so then there is it's like now. I mean, like it's around the table, and it's we decided beforehand to do it this way or something. Well, of course, I mean, I'm always prepared that someone can stand up and say something or whatever. I mean, that can happen. Or I had moments where I really lose it and I don't know how to continue anymore, and then that's also part of it.
If there were a huge interruption, do you think you would edit it out, or do you think you would leave it in?
No, that's part of it. Yeah.
Do you practice some things before you start in the studio, or maybe?
Yeah.
Rehearsal.
Well, I never really practice. I mean, I prepare like the object. I make the objects, and the objects are also there during the process of making the script. So, and then I think about what the text I really prepare. So it's I learn it by head, which always makes But and I think about, and I think that's similar maybe to Danny, that I think about how I want to interact with the object, but I don't rehearse and do rehearsals in the studio in that sense. So that's really happening on the spot. Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe I get it wrong, but so the text is you learn by heart, but the movements you do are just on the spot, or correlated with the text.
Well, what is happening with because I work a lot with plasticine, that's what is happening to the plasticine, with the plasticine, that's happens on the spot, yeah. But there is also a part that is choreography, like the object that is made, that's what happens on the spot, yeah.
So one of the things we were talking about earlier with Danny over dinner was the fact that Belgium doesn't really have a history of performance art, yet you've decided to make it your home here. So do you feel like it's awkward, or I don't know, have you encountered any resistance to the way you're working, or because you're going all around Europe now, it doesn't really matter where you live? But it does seem strange that there isn't more of a, okay, I'm going on hearsay because I don't know, but I've heard that there's not that much of a, I'm sure, I have a feeling that everyone's going to say, don't you know about this and that and this? Okay, I'm sure there's a lot of things I don't know, I'm brand new, but I've heard that there's not much of a history, and how does that affect the context for your work? I mean, at least Amsterdam has Fluxus history, not in our immediate presence, but it was part of Fluxus. It was the same for Germany.
Well, yeah. I don't know. I just make my work, and I don't really. Yeah, I don't really.
Yeah, but you consciously chose to live in Belgium and not Holland, where maybe your work.
Well, yeah, but that's not based on. Yeah, that just happened by coincidence that I end up here. But for me, it's like if I make a video work or performance, for me it's like there's not much. Although the medium is different, it's not much. There's not so much different about it. It's just the way how that's the outcome. That's maybe different, but I don't know how you think about it. But
I can speak from my experience and from my CV that I'm not very often asked or invited in Belgium to do a performance, and that I've done much more in other countries. And also, if you look at the way performances are treated in art magazines or in group exhibitions or so, then it's very little. I mean, if you know, for instance, this magazine, Hart, how often do they write about performances? How there is one performance festival that I know in Brussels.
Performatique, but it's not even happening this year, I don't think.
It's Momentum. That's been going on for 5 or 6 years. No, you have another thing which hasn't come into discussion is, of course, that what we call in Dutch the podiumkunsten, the performing arts, where in theater, they are kind of sharks when it comes to attention. And if in a theater play one person slaps the other one in the face, then they will already call it a performance. Which means that there's a lot of attention, in a way, in the media about performance, but I don't call that performance. That's theater. Point. Performance, what I'm talking about is visual art division, like sculpture, like painting, like video art, land art, and whatever. But for some reason,
Can it not be a hybrid practice?
Sorry?
Can it not be a hybrid practice?
Yes, of course. But I mean, it's in the, to me, it belongs in the visual art department. And in the visual art department, most of the people who are in the institutional or the historical or the critical side, they kind of look like this, and they only see painting, sculpture, a bit of installation, and that's it. But everything that happens, which strangely is very accepted in the avant-garde of the 70s, which is still highly esteemed. The fact that artists in the 70s, especially the American avant-garde of that time, where everybody agrees that it was so important that you had performance art, and you had conceptual art, and you had land art, and you had body art, and you had performance, and you had happenings and everything. That was very important. But now, as soon as you do a performance, 7 out of 10 people will say, but Vito Acconchi's done that. But Herman Nietzsche has done that. But I never read, Barnett Newman has done that. Or Malevich has done that. Or Edward Hopper has done that. I never read that. Which is, a bit of tiring after 35 years.
And most likely, Vito Acconci, I mean, those artists haven't done whatever you're doing. They've reduced everything to performance
but,
art.
I mean,
So anyone who waves their arm.
You have to see that performance is a language, is a technique, is a discipline, and whatever happens in there happens.
But, I mean, Danny,
If I look at the same thing in painting, I can say everything's been painted already, so stop painting.
what do you think about Abramovich flirt with media and with pop culture? And she's a performance artist, and she's doing very peculiar things which are very contested and criticized. And what's your opinion on that?
She's writing herself in art history as the queen of performance art. I don't think that's a very.
That's also mystification, no?
Yeah.
Is she really a queen of?
But the thing is that she's like the big shark in the ocean, eating all the other fish. So I don't see. To me, I don't.
She looks a bit like a shark, yes.
And don't you want to include in your work, or have you thought about including in your work, the fact that today image has a different status than when you started, and the fact that you could film a car accident, unlike in '79 when you probably couldn't?
You could then also. I mean, you had movie cameras.
Well, but the ratio of how many movie cameras per passerby was lower.
But what's striking to me here is that as you say, you refuse to have a documentation, pictures taken, that you work around enigma of the performance itself with the public here.
I'm not
now.
saying that I refuse it. I'm just saying that it's not my part of the job.
Okay.
I don't want to be concerned myself with doing it. If somebody else wants to do it, it's fine as long as you're not in my way.
Okay. No, but I'm thinking that now with social media and all the other communication platforms we have available, that there should be a sort of a temptation to also function there as a performance artist, or is that completely? I say that's not my.
No, because it's much more loose and fluctuable, and people think that it's as much an experience of liking a picture or a performance than actually seeing the performance. And people don't, or they there's also performance is also very much or very often like some extra during the opening of of an exhibition, where you are more of an attraction than you are a work of art. I mean, you don't hang pictures as an attraction on the opening on some event. You hang pictures, you hang paintings because you want people to see the paintings. That's the work. But when there's an opening of an exhibition and there's a performance, it's usually more like it's on some kind of extra to lure people to the opening. So I refuse to do performances at openings of exhibitions.
But I think,
So-
I'm not really agreeing because I think that the paintings also become decoration maybe in a way. So I think the opening is maybe, I think an opening can be a moment which can be super interesting because you are gathering together and you could, but it's often
Depends on
not
what
the
you
case.
do, yes, but
so,
mostly the people who come to the opening of an exhibition, they come to some event, and even with the paintings, they will say, when you meet something, how do you like the show? Oh, I will come back and have a look later.
yeah,
That's what
yeah.
8 out of 10 people say at the opening of an exhibition. So how do you expect them to look at a performance in the way that they are seriously looking or experiencing a work of art if they don't even have the time to look at the paintings?
So the space where you do it, you really decide it yourself, or how does it go?
Depends.
I mean, like, how do you, like,
Sometimes I'm invited, if I'm invited, say, in Switzerland, then yeah, I just go there and I have my idea of what I want to do, and then I just look around and I say, oh, let's do it there. Or maybe under the stairs, better. When
But still
I'm
within the
invited
context.
here in Belgium, sometimes I go to have a look before, and then the space will be more than the space is like also in here. That's one of the things that make the performance. But it's not, to me, the space where I make my own space, basically.
No, but if you're then invited on a, let's say, in a place in Switzerland, is it then a performance festival, or is it then with other works? Because you just said like you have problems with being part of
It
a
depends.
space.
I've been on unique events. I've been on festivals. I've been during exhibitions.
Do you also reenact your own performances?
No.
Just unique happenings.
Because I know what it's like, so I don't have to do it twice. I don't see painters painting their own paintings again.
No.
They will always say that it's a little bit different. But no, for me the experience part is kind of important. Also experience or endurance or physical aspects, they are important, and there are things that like in a lot of performances I've been hanging upside down. So maybe in the beginning then there is an aspect like how long can you stand hanging upside down. In the meantime I know how long I can do it, which is virtually endless. Well, now with my leg, of course, I don't think. But then it becomes part of your technique. It's like maybe a sculpture, the first bronze is like you have to handle the wax and this and that. But the next time, it's just part of all the tools that you have available, and you can use it and make something, just use it in the whole scheme of the performance. But I won't do twice something like trying something as long as I can, because if you do it once, you know it. There's no reason to do it twice.
Maybe if someone interrupts you, do you still want to know how long you can hang upside down on some cut the rope, or
Yeah, or the context changes. that could change maybe, and if you would.
It can, yes. Of course, when I would do a performance tomorrow, where I decide part of the performance will be hanging upside down. Of course, the physical aspect will play a role in it, because the thing is, I can hang upside down virtually endless, but not while doing something else at the same time.
So it's a variation.
So no, it's not a variation, because the starting point of the performance is totally different. In the one performance, you're hanging upside down and doing whatever, and in another performance, the thing that you want to do by hanging upside down is totally different. It's not because a painter would use yellow in one painting, and he uses yellow in another painting, that he's painting the same thing.
You think that the uniqueness is something that is.
It sounds like it's more singularity than uniqueness, right? You're after singularity.
Yeah, because I was thinking you said something about theater a few minutes ago, like you say, like when they slap one in the face, it's a performance. Do you think how? Not that I want to now like the division between a performance and a theater play, let's say. Is there like, for example, a uniqueness that is related to a performance that is not related to a theater play, or
Yes,
or is it
yes.
The theater.
I think
is-
a situational thing? Like
There's a German word for an artwork where there's only one. It's unicat. So my performance, each one of them is unicat. There's only one of them. There's no copies, or there's no. Other people have done reenactments of my performances, which I also think is a fantastic way of documentation, because I consider it like this guy, how's he called? Mikis Popper. It's like Glenn Gould plays Bach, Mikis Popper performs DDP. I mean, that's just the best thing that can happen. Because he's also a good performance artist. Glenn Gould is a fantastic piano player. So when he plays Bach, everybody says, wow. So when Mikis Popper does a performance from DDP, he's a very good performance artist. And he does something from, well, let's say, a good performance artist.
But and how?
Then it's also, wow.
That's quite interesting. How does he reenact? To talk to you and ask you how, or he was at the performance?
The first thing he did,
If there is no
he never
documentation.
spoke to me.
Okay, that's good.
He just said, and also I went there then, and I didn't know what he was going to do.
Wait a minute.
And also he just, all of a sudden he was there, and it was happening.
Did you enjoy it?
Yes, I mean, it was the thriller with the razor blade against the wall, and yeah, I mean, you only have to look for a second and you know what it is. And the strange thing also was that he had totally the same experience feeling afterwards than I had, like 30 years later.
But how did he? That was maybe.
He saw a picture, and he
saw a picture, and then
he read my one sentence.
And then he did.
He read my one sentence. There was nothing more to it.
Yeah.
You don't even need a picture for that.
No, just
You take. It says, I took a razor blade and put it between the wall and my lips. What more do you need? Or another performance is there's a Super 8 movie. It's a performance where I fall down from the stairs 6 times. I mean, what more do you need? When you say I fell down off the stairs 6 times, then everybody has enough imagination to know what happens. You don't need a video from that.
But whether you now on that, what do you think then of artists like in the 70s, like Bas van Hader, that like used the medium as a sort of that he represented something as a
Because
romantic figure.
Because for him the movie was the word.
Yeah. Well, how do you?
I mean that's fine with me, and I like Jan Bastian Houder's work very much, but that's his decision of making his work like that, and it's not my decision. I don't perform just for a camera.
And I suddenly remembered when you did digging for Gordon, which you could see on the website, you could see you digging. Was the digging then for you the performance, or also the fact that people could see it and experience it online as a visual, in the same way that he makes?
First of all, it was a digging, and secondly, it was also the part that there could be people watching, because I never knew if someone was watching. If you do something on a webcam, virtually millions of people can see it. But it can be also that nobody's just watching, because the camera was on 24 hours a day, but I was only digging maybe 15 minutes a day. So I don't know, maybe there were some weird people somewhere sitting on the screen all the time and waiting until I was
But you had a sort of a possibility of replying, or there was a chat
there was a
yeah.
comment board, and
yeah.
you could like
that was important, I think.
it's
you
like
had
you can see a show by appointment in the gallery. You could also see me digging by appointment.
Yeah.
But nobody ever made an appointment.
I had a look at it.
What?
I had a look at it.
But you didn't make an appointment.
That's it, no.
You were lucky then.
I was constantly curious where the location was, but I never found that.
That was the thing, of course. There was a webcam. You could see. Everybody could see me 24 hours a day.
You didn't know
but
where it
nobody
was.
knew where it was.
I think that was a nice part of the whole installation.
And what year was that piece?
Sorry.
What year?
It started in 2006 and it ended in 2010.
You sure it ended?
I didn't dig anymore since then. But it's a hole of about 130 by 130, and by now it's over 6 meters deep. The most difficult part of that performance, something that I didn't think about before, was getting rid of all the sand.
You found a good solution for that, leaving it in the galleries.
I had to figure out many solutions.
So to return to 2 points that you made. One, I do write for HR, and one of the reasons we don't cover I'm not defending the magazine, but everything I propose that's at all temporary is impossible, because the editor has some idea that the show has to be up while the magazine comes out, which of course eliminates gallery exhibitions and performance, and I don't know, for me that makes the magazine a little different than reviews. It's more previews, or I don't know. But anyway, I did review Chris Burden's show, and one of the reasons I wanted to review it wasn't because he wasn't doing any performances with his new museum show, but I wanted to see how they would present the performances, number one, and number two. I did remember that so many people, I lived in LA for 9 years, and I always would meet one or two people a year who told me that they had been at that performance, or they had been at that performance. And you can tell by looking at the pictures, there's usually no one at any performance. It's totally good. So this whole, for me, the oral tradition exists with someone like Chris Burden, even, who has really well documented projects that somehow people look at things and it becomes part of their personal memory, even if there's a picture instead of just a story. And I think that's already a fascinating aspect of performance. And I'm sure you're going to have people tell you all your life that they were in Dusseldorf, or they were in wherever, and I don't know why that happens, why people, they hear about something and they have to participate in it by making it their own memory. I think I would love to have a psychologist work on this project, because I think it's really fascinating. That it's not enough to, I heard about it, I was there. You know, even if no one was there.
Public appropriation.
It's a kind of, yeah. I think people's memories are really vulnerable. I think, first of all, memory is extremely vulnerable. It's very easy to plant memories, and apparently we plant memories on ourselves too. That's all I can imagine. So there's lots of people that haven't asked questions. You know, one thing I have to apologize. Initially, we had the idea that you would say your name first so that we would get to know each other when we come every month. We remember who we are. And I forgot to encourage people to do that. So maybe the rest of the people that ask questions can give their name first so that when we meet you again on February 26th, we'll have a sense of who you are as opposed to just, oh yeah, you were here, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, do you have more questions?
So I can say my name.
Yes.
I don't mind saying my name. My name is Pablo. No, I don't. Well, it's just the thing that I'm sorry. I don't know your work. I just know Danny, and mainly because I saw videos of him on YouTube and because I met him with his band. Which interested me also was just when I came in, you were talking about that there's this distance, or because you're sitting at a table, or in Düsseldorf they were sitting that far away, and I thought, well, Danny's work, the parts that I know of it, are very much, he's often hurting his body. He's often asking the people to hurt his body. When you were lying under the wooden floor, we recently talked about this on email. Maybe it's also because of that there's a distance, because you sit there with plasticine, I think, then, and he is actively hurting himself, which maybe opens up the audience to interact with the performer itself. And it's just a thing that I thought of. You think that might be a fact? I don't know in which way you hurt yourself or have do things to yourself while you're doing the performance.
She gets a lot of stuff under her fingernails like that.
Yeah. Might that be a thing that creates a distance with the present audience?
Well,
But I don't think there is a distance. I mean, there is maybe sometimes a physical distance, but
It wasn't really a question. It was just.
no, yeah, but
But the medium is different, as I understand. So then he has a concept on the medium, that performance is the medium. And I think you're combining you mentioned objects, a video as an element, and and your tension as an element. So
in my work, there's also this kind of distance, because in theory, people don't know what I'm going to do. That's the first thing. And there's always this, I mean, most people kind of start to know me, and there's always this atmosphere of danger, which also creates kind of distance. The only thing is that I tried in some way to break the distance, either by being in between the audience, or by doing something which is so physical that you can almost feel it yourself, which is a kind of, but it's a much more personal distance, because people will say, oh, that must hurt, which creates a kind of not a connection, because you know what's happening there physically, and the way you look at it creates something that's like a lock between me and the audience.
Yeah,
Even when, especially with there was this one performance in Leuven where it was this kind of interactive thing. So it was an exhibition about a painting, the 300th anniversary of a painting by Rogier van der Weyden, De Marteling van de the torture of the holy Erasmus. And it's this guy, it's a saint, who's lying on a platform, and there's a pulley, and they're like pulling his intestines out. So that was kind of the theme of the exhibition. And I did my performance on the last day of the exhibition while the rooms were empty, so there was nothing to see anymore in the rooms. People went in, and the door to the street was a glass, and it opened inwards, so you could not push. And so when everybody was in and looking around, well, nothing here. I was outside, and I tied a piece of rope to the door, and I swallowed the other part. So I was lying outside, and people could see me, and they saw through the door, there's a rope here, and the other part is in his mouth, in his throat. So somebody had to open the door and pull the rope out of my throat. And there were not so many, there were maybe, I think there were less than 20 people, so something like here. And I know from people afterwards that there was utter panic outside. I mean, not running around, but everyone was standing there, oh my God, fuck. Looking around, the door there, it's going nowhere. The window, we're on the first floor. Fuck.
Feeling of terror.
Yeah. And I was just doing nothing. I was only trying to swallow this rope, which was totally difficult. But you see there, and there was this kind of connection because you knew. I mean, all of a sudden there was no distance anymore because somebody of the 18 people in there had to pull the door.
And what happened?
While they were still not knowing what to do, somebody who walked in kind of by accident. He was not, he was just passing by, and he was some kind of I don't know, he was just wandering around and not just knowing where he ended up. And he just went out and he opened the door. Like nothing. Not aware, not like he was not even aware of what he was doing. Nobody actually saw it happen because everybody was so shocked.
When you say that there's this feeling, this fear with the people, this tension of not knowing what's going to happen, is that important to you? Almost this fear, this that you cannot count on what will happen next. Is that important? Does that make the
I knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, but the audience. Does that make
the only thing I didn't know was when.
Yeah.
But I knew what was going to happen. Because it was in late, when was it? In 93 or 94, so there were no mobile phones to call someone and, hey, come and rescue us with a pair of scissors. They couldn't do anything except that.
But is it important for any performance artist to go for that fear of the unknown in the audience, of to tap into that tension of what's going to happen, especially if, for example, you only do a performance once?
There's always, when you do a performance, there's always an aspect that you cannot foresee. You never know. You can do the most simple, kind thing. If there's one person in the audience who doesn't like it and throws a bottle at your head, you never know. But it's usually not the kind of thing that you calculate. I usually don't count too much on random events. When I want some reaction from the audience, I know perfectly well what I want.
then you've thought about how you're going to provoke it. And for you.
And the thing is about when we talk about rehearsing, I tried because I had to decide which kind of rope I was going to swallow. Not too thick, not too thin. So that's the one thing in 35 years that I tried before, and it didn't work. I couldn't, because you have this in your throat. When you swallow something, you can. When you swallow an object, you can swallow it. But when it's a piece of rope, your throat says, "Oh, it's not everything." Back. I couldn't do it. And yeah, when I started, I tried it in the afternoon, and in the evening, I said, yeah, well, and then I was lying there outside, and I said, well, now I'm only here to do one thing, swallow that rope. And then you swallow it. I could, it was very strange because I could feel it in my mouth, and I could feel it go down, and it was like a physical experience that you feel something and you feel it going, but you feel it in your mouth, in the back of your mouth, in your throat, down your pipe. You feel it going down, but you feel it constantly, all the time. And I was like, oh, now it's there. Now it's there. Hop, it was gone.
But you also want to bite it, right? I mean, like, it's the effect of closing the mouth. I mean, you can't close the mouth. Swallow.
You cannot really swallow. I mean, you swallow and it starts going down your throat, but then it goes back because there's still something in your. It's a very strange physical thing. Try it.
Yeah, we did it. I remember when I was young, we had this black candies, and you can roll them up. And we swallowed them, and the winner was who could do it the first. The thing is, like, your the stomach is a little sour, or the throat is sour, so automatically it destroys the rope after like 50 centimeters or something. But it's a very, like, you really have to practice, and then you get.
Yeah, I guess your kind of rope couldn't destroy by.
It was an rope.
But how thick was it? I mean, what was the diameter? Yeah, I mean, like
something like 1.5, 2 millimeter. But it's like hairy. It's like not
scratches.
Yeah.
So you was getting all the time?
For maybe a few seconds or so. But that's also the thing that sometimes people say, how can you do this? But also I never had any injuries or whatever. I fell down of a marble staircase 6 times, and I stood up and went, oh.
But you got crushed by a car.
Because like, yeah, I mean, you're there and you're only there to do one thing. It's falling down, walking up, falling down 6 times, and you're so in this thing that you do it, and that's also because it's so much work before you're ready to do it. It's like a painter would like have everything 6 months only work in his head, and then one afternoon come in his studio and do like this and finish the painting. It's a little bit the same thing.
I have a question for you. Because I think you were really more busy with the physicality, I think, and I was just wondering because I think we didn't brought up what was your approach to use performance as a medium or part of your medium to communicate some ideas or I don't know.
Well, I think maybe a big part of it is the
Vulnerability.
And but also to like a lot of my performances are like the scripts that I write beforehand are very much about how the making of a work, or how the mind, like creative mind, is thinking in a way, or how one makes actually, and what kind of decisions are made during such processes. But what I found interesting is that while I think in a performance I can really so it gives a description of something on the one hand, or an analysis of something, but at the same time it's happening. So that's for me what is interesting when it is performed. And I think that's the reason why I started to perform, or give these talks live.
But when you talk about script, like, is there a certain amount of like coincidence, like, or is it all really like 101 to the scripts when you perform? Or
I'm very precise, so I tend to think about and so the script is really the script. There is nothing improvised about in what I'm saying.
But do you practice?
Yeah, because it's a half an hour of monologue. So, and for me, the way how it's written, it's really important in a way, like the way how I formulate the things. But I think that but what I said earlier, like when although it's very scripted and written beforehand, it has to be tested. Like it's still sort of tested in the moment.
May I just ask, like, I don't want to, your own practice, but do you film yourself on forehand and you say that, okay, it's a good timing, that, or for a mirror or something that feels good, or it's more like an inner feeling, you test it once and then you say, okay, that's a good script, performance, balance or something?
I never film it beforehand, and like you weren't here before, but I was also explaining that that what is made on the spot. Like for example, I have this performance where I have a table, and the performance is called 5 Possible Lectures and 6 Possibilities for a Sculpture, and it's a sort of overview of a whole lecture series that I did, and that's pretty much about started about concerns, like more formal concerns I have about an object that I have made, and slowly moved into, because I do use a lot of repetition in my work, because I think by repeating, for me it's a sort of exercise, and I notice different new things actually. So within the exercise, I sort of move. I think it's travel. And so I have this table, and it was like colors of plasticine, but I had like a gray layer over it, so you wouldn't see the colors. And I had this idea of like to use the table in a way, the table became the object. And but I never. I mean, when I started working, like digging in the table, and all these colors appeared, I was also surprised myself in a way, like what was happening there on the table. So there is this script, and I'm very sort of very dry giving this talk, but at the same time this thing happens on the table that is also in a way surprising for me. So there is, and I think there it becomes interesting for me, because then these two things, so, the idea and the intuition of what is happening on the moment, have to interact in a way. So I think that's what I like about
Is it, I don't know, maybe I'm interpreting too much, but is it also that your performances are in a way representing your working process or your doubts, and presenting this as a sort of, in the end, as a sort of a result? I don't know, maybe it's too much. Like that's while working, you have sort of doubts, and then you, because you said, I saw this I saw a bit of images of the five possible lectures on the 5 possible sculptures, like already the way how the title is sort of doubt, or sort of, is this maybe like you already put a question in your performance, or is that what you want to communicate with the performance?
You mean like, sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, no, just like in general, like that there's sort of this the process where you're busy with, is that maybe becomes a performance, or?
Well, for me, actually, maybe what some people say, like the explanation. I don't really see it. Well, it's maybe actually the opposite of mystification. What I'm actually trying to do in my practice, I really tend to demystify things, but by doing that, it tends to become more complex. So that's actually what I'm.
So by trying to demystify, you mystify, or
no, not mystify, but it might. It might be confusing, yeah. Yeah.
Or does it bring up more new questions?
New questions, yeah.
But is it like are your words then a kind of meta level, like where you speak about what you're doing at the same time?
Sometimes it's corresponding, but often not. Yeah. So yeah, it does correspond at certain moments, but like sometimes it's while you explain maybe, and you can also draw to make it more clearly. Like sometimes you do that, but then sometimes these two things are really two separate things happening at the same time. But they always relate in a way to each other. Yes.
Are your, but I'm just sorry, I can't see it, but are your words about how to perform?
Also, sometimes. Well, I did this work, my most recent lecture was called The Hand, the Eye, and It. And so I have my hand, sort of a copy of my hand made of plasticine. And I work with that material a lot because it's sort of animating. And I really like it about it, that it's also moved. It's a sort of temporary statement anyway that you can make, and that performance is very much talking or trying to grasp the what it's so hard without to divide all kinds of things that are sort of abstract concepts, and try to divide them and make them actually more like, for example, with the characters, you have to form, you have to create, and you have the intuition, how do you deal with each other. So yeah, sometimes it's really about, it refers to itself in a way, sometimes, yeah.
Do either of you have performances planned that we could attend? Anything coming up that we should put on our schedule? Yours is in another country, but I'm just saying. I'm saying if you are having, it's a joke. If you are having a performance, we have to go to another country. But
no, I have an exhibition.
oh, great.
In Brugge in the end of May.
Okay.
But I don't think I will be physically in shape yet to do a performance because of my accident. But I invited. Normally the exhibition would have been last September, so it's postponed already.
What about your double? Could he do some performances? No, the guy that does the cover performances.
No.
Mickey's Papa.
But I did invite 5 other performance artists, like from my generation, to do performances. And the installation that I'm building is also kind of a non-static thing, because I'm building a park. I mean, a real park with plants and everything. So the thing is that there will be performances at the beginning of the exhibition and at the end, and the exhibition will look different at the end because some plants will grow, others will decay.
And is the whole exhibition outdoors, or there's an inside?
No, it's inside.
Oh, the
And
park's
there's no
inside.
daylight.
The park's inside.
The park's inside.
And
it's a real park.
And what institution?
It's a real park on a slightly smaller scale, and it's completely rebuilt with all kinds of waste material, old chairs, carpets, whatever, and then covered with layers of dirt.
Will it also be a space for the performance artists? Will they perform in your park?
So yeah, I'm telling there's 3 people for whom I prepare a space where they will do the performance. So whatever is left from the performance is part of the exhibition, and whatever is prepared for the next performances is also part of the exhibition, because the exhibition is about the process of how to make a performance actually, because there will also be a small publication with interviews with all the artists about their this specific aspect of work, the preparation and how you work on it.
And for how long? I mean, what's the process? I mean, like, for how long is the, what's the time like it's changing and the next one comes and so on?
5 weeks.
5 weeks? It's in a museum or a gallery or like an office?
It's in a, it's in a space from the city of Houben. It's in the fact is that the park is a park from Vilvoorde, where I was born, and the space, they're both from the same time, like late 1800s, kind of industrialized romanticism. Like in the park, they have a romantic ruin, which is not a real ruin because it was built as a ruin, but that's what they did in the late 1800s, like this kind of industrialized romantic parks with hills and a bridge where there were no hills. They just built it because it looked nice to have it, and it looked nice to have.
But there is also something involved with crime, or not?
No, not really.
Pickpocket.
pockets in your part.
Say the part.
I was wondering because in the beginning you said that the subject would be the exploration of the unknown and mystification, but I think that there maybe we worked around that subject, or we dealt with that subject in an indirect way. But while we were talking about how performance art is, I was thinking that maybe personally I prefer like 19th century literature for or the mysticism in there, and I think that what appeals me there is that acts are always followed through, and that people complete something, and that the mystification comes forth from taking a seemingly irrational choice. And when I hear about the performances or what they are like, I hear that they are more like exploration of something. Even though you do rather extreme things with your body, it still remains exploration of human behavior without setting a clear statement. So I was wondering, is it a phenomenon of our times that we are no longer inclined to make hard choices because of the society we live in? Or is it just a characteristic of performance art that the kind of mysticism that is generated in, for example, Dostoevsky, I don't say it as a judgment that the art would be less, but I don't find it in performance art. Yeah, I don't know.
Can you elaborate on an example of a hard choice that Dostoevsky made?
Well, for example, the choice in the Brothers Karamazov, the choice that the son who is in love with the woman, he's almost like a crazy dog or something. He keeps on going back for her and back for her and back for her. Or the choice that one person makes to kill the woman in Crime and Punishment. It generates a kind of mysticism to me because he clearly defines why he does it, but still it also seems quite irrational, and it seems born out of a kind of melancholia that you can't explain at that moment. So that's what I see as the...
Yeah, but I don't really see why there would be a hard such difference in... Well, I'm not saying that I wasn't the idea of mystification was of course not my idea to start with, but in there is of course a thing that in literature what you call a hard choice is fictional choice.
But that's why I asked if it's a characteristic of performance.
If I say I'm going to swallow that rope and block people in the room, I could also say I'm going to put my head under a blade, a guillotine, and if they want to go out, they have to cut off my head.
That's right.
Would that be?
That would be a hard choice.
I don't know. Why would it be a harder choice? Why is... I think the act when I would cut my head, it would be less painful than having this lying there and waiting until the rope is pulled out. You think that it's not so hard, that cutting off my hand is harder, but it's very easy. I don't think that's a hard choice. It's an easy choice because you do that and it's done.
Yeah, but it's hard for the guy who did it not on purpose.
It's hard for a guy, but I mean, it's the decision because you also you think that it's you consider it a hard choice about this guy who commits these crimes and so that's your point of view. I will explain on that. It's from, let's say, 7 or 8 or 9 years. I've corresponded with serial killers imprisoned for various sorts of crime. Because I was interested in the effect of how they manage their work, let's say, which is very similar to the work of an artist. You have an idea, you have an inspiration, which is called the trigger point. Then you do everything, you have this fantasy that you work out, and you do everything possible to realize that fantasy, which is for the serial killer murder, crime, and which is for the artist an artwork, in my case, a performance. And then you do it.
That's psychopathic.
And then that's the high point, and then you go into a cooling off period, because as soon as the act is happened, you lose all interest in it. And the thing is that it starts over again and again and again. That's why we easily call serial killers serial killers. But artists have the same kind of pattern, because they do the same thing in a little bit different all the time, again and again and again.
Yes.
And the thing is that the hard thing, that what we call hard, is only because society tells us that crime is hard and wrong, and you consider it a hard choice to kill somebody. But for the person who kills somebody, it's not a hard choice at all. It is not a hard choice for the serial killer, because it's the thing that drives him. But it's also not a hard choice if we have an argument when we go out of the door, and the argument continues. 5 minutes before one kills the other, we don't know who the murderer is and who the victim is. It's only the one who takes the bottle first, crashes it on the table, and stabs the other person.
But I think that what generates for me the mysticism, or how we would call it, of the hard choice is also the elaboration before the choice is made. And if the serial killer kills because it gives him a thrill, but the thrill is not elaborated, then to me there will be no point of interest. But if I think in Dostoevsky also the justification and the tempo and rhythm of that.
There's only 20 minutes left. Take care, because I have recordings. The pleasure, the thoughts, but also the act of the murder can take several days or weeks. We have people who bury the body under the floorboards and dig it up and sit it next to them in the couch and watch television together with the corpse. I mean, that's just a long.
But for you, that's the same then. The strong feelings are strong feelings. Full stop.
It's how to say, a likely kind of thing. It's
similar.
It's similar. Psychologically, it's exactly the same kind of pattern. Only it is differently approached by society, because of course we live in a kind of society where we cannot tolerate murder, but the thing is that it also is society that tells us that art is something that we have to treasure, that we have to keep, that we have to criticize, that we have to historize, and that we have to elaborate. But basically, you can't do anything worthily with art. Art serves nothing at all. It's only because people in the ages in our society, it grew into something that where we tolerate art. We not only tolerate it, but think it as something very special, something very good. And because of that, because we consider it as something which is highly regarded, it's possible to have this kind of what we call hard choices, but they are not choices at all. They are fantasies. They might be hard fantasies, but they are not choices.
But
There are no cases known of artists who made hard choices in their work, who also made hard choices in their life. There are no known cases of deliberate murders or crimes by artists.
Oh, we talk about like the mystic. I mean, like when I look to Hedwig's work, it's the hidden, the unknown.
Right.
Right. I mean, this is what she explores throughout the process, and is surprised by it. It's a self-surprise and a surprise she's communicating, even if it's so strict. And for me, I mean, your work is quite similar to some certain extent, because like you have strongly self-experienced, unknown ever before, and the hard. I mean, the practice might be a little different, but like for me, the hardest choice, according to the word, is not to make a choice, because to get confronted with not making the choice, to be in the process of performance, this is the hardest you can ever do, and this is when you explore. I mean, everybody knows I'm the biggest Who's Not fan. I mean, but when you look to his repetitive, all the time, again and again, then exploration stops. Then the unknown really pops up, because out of this like... No. I mean, just no. It's just a general statement. I mean, just to when I see the practice of like how you approach.
I think that you were also maybe struck by the use of the word that they're exploring things.
Mm-hmm.
But I would think all artists, whether they're making sculpture or paintings or photography, they're always exploring something. I think that we just live in this field of something. But most artists talk about wanting to explore something. That's the motivation of the work.
But there is a difference in how definitively you put down, or how to say, how definitively you inscribe the results of your exploration. To me, at least.
But I'm just
That's
saying,
how
I
it
think
feels.
that even most painters I know, even if their paintings look all alike, they'll tell you this one was for this purpose and this one was for this purpose. This, you know, they have in their head this idea that each painting is a new project, even though it's not so visible. Necessarily.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, like you start with a certain like idea or concept, and then they reveal some certain unknown throughout making it. So and so far, I don't know if there is so much difference between a painting or a performance.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
like, because like you've got the concept, you've got this idea, and then you start working, and like to work. I mean, that's for me pretty similar to the technique.
Somehow after 9, I don't want to end it if there's people that want to have a discussion, but I think that our guests have really outperformed themselves and their generosity, and everyone. We really appreciate the questions, and we hope you'll join us again in a month for our next topic. We're trying to have a discussion about. I'm not going to tell you who the guests are because we don't have the guests confirmed, but I'll tell you what the planned topic is. Mysticism or decidedly undecided. That's going to be a good topic for him. Okay, so some exhibitions point at something that is clearly felt, though not necessarily perceptible in the objects on view. Their openness, anyway, it's going to be all about how you look at something and you think that it means something, but you have no idea what it means. If the mystical rather lies in the spectator's imaginations, then we aim to discuss just how exhibitions convey the mysticism. But hopefully we'll have our selected guests to help us get through this topic. Anyway, I just passed around a mailing list. It's almost around. And tell your friends, we think we could fit 100 people in this room if we had to. So, easy? We get rid of the table.
Layers.
Layers.
We can, one can sit on.
We're purposely centrally located in Brussels so that we can draw people to the, to the center of the nation. But we're also considering going on the road. So for whatever reason, you would prefer that we did one of our LWCs in another community, put that, contact us. Our email is the same as our website is lastwednesdaycritics.com, and our email is lastwednesdaycritics@gmail.com. So definitely contact us if you have suggestions on guests or topics or places we should go that we haven't considered. Because right now we're just planning to do everything here just because it's simple and they're giving us this room and they seem very supportive. Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
People who are into pictures,
Talk about documentation.
I made a book with 30 years of all my performance work, which was a hard thing to do because, as I said, from some performance, most of the pictures that are in here are the only pictures I have. So if you want to for those.
Little bit. Academic.